Hello YouTube, Joey here from TeamBurningInfinitey, bringing you another episode of How to Raise the Flag. So last episode we went over supplies, basically everything you need to get into the game and whatnot. This episode we're going to go over the basic rules. I know a lot of our subs know how to play the game, and most Buddyfight players would know how to play the game. But this is for anyone who's new to the game, etc. So I just want to get this out of the way because it really is important to know the basic rules, since there are people who do forget these things sometimes, and it hurts them a lot. So I'm just going to go over the rule book basically, and I might go over a couple other things that aren't in the rule book. I did print one out. I printed out like everything on the rules page recently, just so I could have it if need be. But I figured, why not go over this for the second episode. So the first page pretty much goes over all the zones on the playmat, and also the winning condition of the game, which is to get your opponent's life down to 0. So, let's go over the zones. Usually, you're going to have a deck zone, which would be here, if we go according to their playmat. I throw my deck towards the top. A drop zone, a gauge zone, so it's about here, and then your right, center, left, and then flag, buddy, and then they call this a spell area, but it's not an official zone. There is no real official zone for spells. People just tend to put them here since it's an open space and it's kind of symmetrical. You could also put them here, or like here if it's a set. I don't know, whatever works for you, but I tend to put mine here if it's like 1 or 2 set spells in the deck, because that's just the neatest place to put them. If playing something like Katana World, God knows where to put stuff, but yeah, I just want to show you gauge zone, where all your gauge would go. The right, center, and left are areas to call monsters. The flag is the flag, which is the world you play. It lets you play the cards, and then your buddy, because you need a buddy monster to play. So that's that. I remember I did things in this order. Nope. And now it's all in order. Should be in order. Might be in order. Doesn't really matter. I just wanted to prove my point of all the zones. So yeah, that's what the zones allow you to do. That pretty much sums up the first page. I'm kind of going to be doing a page-by-page walkthrough of this. The second page describes type of cards you have. Well, the second page begins describing the types of cards there are. So, I'm going to just begin with the flag. The flag basically states what world you play for and allows you to play that type of card. Legend World cards, Dragon World cards, whatever, so on and so forth. The buddy monster is a monster you'd have in your buddy zone. And then, if that card is in your hand, you may move the monster from the buddy zone to the zone you're going to call it in, left, center, right, depending. Like, this can't be called center, so playing it in center would be stupid. But, for example, buddy call it right. And so on and so forth, as I said. It's just, the buddy allows you, is an extra mechanic of the game, where you call your buddy to a certain zone into your hand by removing this monster from the buddy zone to the zone you want to call in, so let's say the right, and then you put the card from your hand, that's your buddy, into the buddy zone in rested position. After buddy calling successfully resolves, you gain a life, and that's that. That's the only purpose of the buddy, other than the fact that there's a few buddy-oriented cards throughout the game, but the main one is the buddy call. The second type of card they go over is an item card. I am just going to pull out Great Demonic Sword Clarent. Clarent is a 5,000 power 2 critical weapon, but I'm not going into depth about the weapon. The weapon basically allows you as a fighter to play into the game interactively. The weapon is something you would equip as a fighter, and if your center is open, you may attack with the weapon unless it states otherwise. But this is basically saying you are fighting alongside your monsters and not just your monsters. That's pretty much what that is. It has a power, like this weapon has 5,000 power for instance, but every weapon has a power and every weapon has a critical, which is the amount of damage it deals. Some weapons have defense, some don't. well, 90% of item cards do not have defense, and certain monsters that can become items usually have defense. So that's that. Those are the type of cards that are on the second page. The third page consists of monster cards. Monster cards are very fun. So let's take some monsters. 1s, 2s, 3s. Okay, so we have different monsters. Every monster has a size. Like, I'm just going to throw a 2, a 3, and a 1. There are 4 sizes in the game. I'm going to grab... No, it should be in here. I forgot about zeros. Okay. We're taking out the zeros. Boom, 0. So the game has 4 sizes. You have a size 0, a size 1, a size 2, and a size 3. There is a size 4 technically, but that's a different story, and that does not follow the genericals of the game. So a size 0 is basically a monster that's usually typically pretty weak. It's nothing exceptional in terms of the card itself. The nice thing about zeros is the fact they don't take up any space on the board other than their zone. And there are 3 zones in the game. You can't see that number of monsters. But the nice thing is zeros do not take up your size gap spaces. Your size has a gap of 3. Which means you may call any range of monsters that adds up to the size number of 3. So I can have things like a 1, a 2, and a 0, a 1 and a 2, a 1, and a 1. This is a no-go in most scenarios. Or you can have a 3. Now, you can also have 3 and 0. This is really nice because you get more attacks, etc. But you don't want to stack up on zeros because they're pretty weak by themselves. So that's kind of that. The gap of 3 type of monsters. Then there are vanilla monsters like this that just have generically the higher stats of their size and type for each world. And then you have monsters with effects that generally have lower stats in their world, but they have effects. Effects differ from each type of monster, size, and world, so I'm not going to get too into that. And then the last 2 cards we have are impact cards and spell cards. So spell cards are pretty simple. Let's take something like a Holy Grail, and for impacts, we'll just pull out these because I need to go over both of these. So spells are cards that have conditions to be played sometimes, and sometimes they don't. They aren't monsters. They don't remain on the board after being cast unless they have the set ability, and they usually just have a one-time effect or a continuous effect if it's a set spell. So they just there for benefits, really. You play them, they go away, and then you get your benefit, or you play it stays there and you get your benefit depending on the type of spell. And that leaves us with impacts. We usually have offensive impacts, such as this, or counter impacts. Counter impacts are usually more defensive, and they give you benefits. Like this, for example, is Calibrating Glyph, where you can cast at any point in the game if you have a counter timing available, and you also have 4 more heroes. That's this card's condition, but we're not going to that. But it has a counter ability, which basically allows you to chain it to something. It's like chainable cards. And then you have regular impacts like these, which begin the chain, you pay their cost, you meet the conditions, and then its effect goes off. And that's kind of how that works. So that is that for card types. Now if we flip to the next page, we have it basically going over how to prepare for the game in multiple steps, and also the start phase. I can go over this fairly simple. Usually what you do is you get your flag and your buddy, you put them out face down, unless you're just playing casually and you just turn face up or whatever, you don't care that much. At events, I try to keep facing down because some judges may or may not call you out for it. You have your deck shuffled. Let's say we shuffle it a few times. You put it in the deck zone or wherever you put your deck on your mat, and then you prepare the hand, which is 6 cards in both players' starting hands, and both players start with 2 gauge unless stated otherwise. Because there's a flag called Dragon Iron, and iron is not something I'm going to get into right now, but it basically says that you may start the game with 12 life and 4 cards in hand, instead of the usual 6 cards in hand, 2 gauge, and 10 life. So that is pretty much how you prepare for the game. Once the game begins, both players raise their flags, or open the flag as they call it in Japan, and then so on and so forth. Usually decide who goes first by a die roll. Bushy Road says whoever gets the high roll and wins that goes first automatically, so that is what I play by when it comes to using dice. And after the player goes first, they have the start phase, and the start phase basically says if you are not going first, you can draw a card. So let's say we're going second, we draw a card, and then you get to charge a card from your hand and draw another card. So we're going to charge 1 card into the gauge face down. Neither player gets to see it from this point on, and you draw a card. Now I'm just going to take these out, even though we're not playing an actual game. You still shouldn't have cards with different sleeves. And basically, that's how the start phase works. Now, going on to the next page, you get the main phase. The main phase is probably the biggest phase in the game, because it is what allows you to cast regular spells, non-chainable things, and also call monsters and set up your board. So let's say our hand looks something like, let's say we want to call it size 3. We would pay its call cost, and then call it to whatever zone we want. It is size 3, so I cannot call any other monsters unless they are zeros, but I don't have a 0 in my hand, as you guys can see, so that would be that. At the end of the main phase, the battle phase occurs. The battle phase basically says you get to choose a monster or an item on your field. Let's say we had this equipped, and if you are able to attack with it, you may rest it, and then announce an attack. So this is where the first big counter timing comes from. You have a counter timing at end phase, at the end of each phase and the beginning of each phase, but I'm not going to get into all that because that's not really basic and that's not the rulebook, but that's a big thing. So you attack. Let's say your opponent wants to respond. They cast a spell or some kind of effect. Let's say we're playing Dragon World, and Oberon is attacking for 2. I can cast a white dragon shield, and that would reduce the damage by 2. And it is 2 critical. 2 reduced by 2 is 0, so no damage goes through. His effect would go off. It's a double attack. If I am going first, I cannot attack twice, but if I am going second, I can attack a second time. The fighter who is going first can only attack once, no matter what kind of monster item they use, and they cannot link attack on the first turn. A link attack is something where you would have multiple monsters out in the field, and you attack simultaneously instead of 1, 2, 3. It is 1 attack. That combines the critical and power of the monsters in the link attack. That's pretty much all there is to say. Now, I'm going to mention this one very, very, very important thing that is not in the rulebook, or if it is, I didn't completely read it. You only get 1 counter per ability, or 1 ability per chain if it has a counter timing. Now, I don't know how to explain whether a card has a counter timing or not, because I'm not a judge or a rule-heavy person, but as a player who's played the game for quite a bit, I just know which ones do and don't. I could probably get a judge or someone who's extremely familiar with rulings on a different episode if I want to go in depth on that in this series later on. But let's say I attack. This is not a counter. Well, it creates a chain, but it does not use the player's counter timing. So let's say they play their white dragon shield, and I don't want it happening because I can win the game. I can use my counter timing to play something like this, that after I paid its call cost, let's say I paid this, and there's some cards already in the drop zone, so I paid, the card goes through, everything happens. That's the one counter timing per person. This player cannot cast another white dragon shield to try and save themselves, because that is multiple counters in the same chain link, and this game does not have big chain links, probably to stop confusion and whatnot, and prevent it from being anything like Yu-Gi-Oh's mess or Magic's mess, and that is why. That's pretty unique to Buddyfight. Most card games do have multiple chain links, and it makes the game simpler, but it also makes it very thought heavy on what you're supposed to do, because you don't want to waste your counter timings, I suppose is the way I want to say it. So and knowing your counter timings and knowing which cards you want to use during which counter timings is really big, and it helps a lot as a player. So that's one thing. I am not going to get any more in depth on that. That pretty much covers the battle phase. Actually, no, there are a couple things I probably should mention. If your opponent has a monster in the center, you have to kill that monster first in order to hit them as a player and deal damage to their life. And destroying monsters does not inflict damage unless said otherwise. Like if they are in the center and I have a card with Penetrate, Penetrate allows me to deal damage if I destroy a monster in the center through battle, equal to the critical of the attacking card. And Penetrate stacks up, so if I link attack this, and something like Arthur, if I can find Arthur, he gains Penetrate as link attack. They both have Penetrate. This would Penetrate for 4 damage instead of 2. Penetrate does stack, but it has to destroy the monster. If the monster is destroyed by any other means, whether it be the owner's card effect or your card effect, Penetrate does not go through, and the card is destroyed by other means. That pretty much covers everything important that I need to go over. I am not going in-depth on any phase because I just want to flip through the rulebook so people can learn the rules, and anything in-depth might be a later episode. So this kind of... Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this page also mentions the final phase. The final phase is where you can cast things like non-counter impacts. That's pretty much all it's used for. It's used for casting impacts. This goes over keywords. Keywords are things like Penetrate, as I said. Equipment change is a keyword. Counter is a keyword. Soul Guard is a keyword. I'll get a card for Penetrate. Double Attack is a keyword. Yeah, this has Penetrate. I'll take that. This is Counter Attack, which is a keyword. And that's that. Okay, so these are all keywords. Keywords are cards that are associated with certain things. They're usually highlighted in red, such as this, if you can see it, what I'm talking about. So yeah, and I probably made it blurry for a second, so I'm sorry about that. But keywords just give different benefits. Penetrate is if you destroy a monster in the center, you get to deal damage equal to the monster's critical that destroyed it. Soul Guard is the ability to remove a soul to prevent a card from leaving the field by any card effects or destruction whatsoever. Oh yeah, I forgot Move. This card is Move. Move is the ability to move from an open zone, from one zone to another open zone. You can't go move on top of a monster and then make this instantly change somehow. No. Move has to be from one to the other, or one to the other, or one to the other, etc. Has to be open. Counterattack is a keyword that basically allows the monster to destroy a monster through card effect. Counterattack is a card effect, not an actual attack. It destroys it after the battle has resolved. If this card is still remaining on the field somehow, you can destroy a monster with defense equal to or less than the monster's power. I'm sorry. So, that's counterattack, gone over Penetrate, gone over Move, not gone over Soul Guard. Double attack, triple attack, stuff like that. They are in red. They basically state that after you rest, you can stand back up to attack again, but it has to be resting from an attack. If it's rested by a card effect such as Snake Gaze, the card cannot restand. We have Counter. Counter is a keyword that basically says you may chain it to an effect of something. If that effect creates a counter timing, as said, I'm not sure how to explain which ones create and don't create because I'm not extremely rule heavy. I just know some rules. I don't know how to explain it. That's really what it is. But counter, and counters don't have to be activated in response to something. They are able to be activated to respond to something if the conditions are met. But if there is no condition to cast a card, like this has 2 gauge and then the counter ability, if I just pay the 2 gauge on my turn in the main phase, I can cast the card. And equipment changes the ability to bounce back a card to an item from your hand when you equip a different weapon. Like, let's say I change it from this to this. This card would go to my hand instead of being sent to the drop because I equipped a different item. 99.9% of the time, you may only have one item equipped unless you're playing Dungeon World Nights, but that is a different story for a different day. So, that is what that is. This page also explains how Penetrate works. Like, I went over how Soul Guard works, I went over that. It also explains act abilities where you have to announce that you're going to do something. Like, let's say, Merlin. Let's say I want to use his effect to pay gauge and discard a card to look at the top 5 cards of my deck for a hero or up to 2 hero spell and item cards. I have to announce that I'm doing that. Before that, and depending on the card, it does create a counter timing, but it does not stop it if the card is destroyed unless the card is required to be on the field for the effect to go off. It also explains that the deck minimum is 50 cards, or you have to play at least 50 cards in your main deck. You have to have a flag. You have to have a buddy that is a monster card, unless stated otherwise. Like, there's an item that can be a buddy, but aside from the item, your buddy has to be a monster. Maximum of 4 cards with the same name is allowed in the deck. Minimum is 1 or 0. Your buddy is not included in the deck count, and nor is your flag. And that's pretty much what that page is about. This explains more keywords: double attack, counter attack. Set is another keyword for set spells that allows it to remain on the field. I went over that before. Explains the effective use abilities. Explained move. And then this just has the Q&A. So that pretty much covers the ground rules of the game. I'm not sure what episode 3 is going to be about, but I did explain this. I explained pretty much most of the basic rules, so you should be able to pick up, like, if you had 2 child acts and you had a friend, you guys could probably both pick it up after watching this video and have a game with minimal ruling issues, unless it is complicated rulings that neither player knows. But as I said, trial decks usually don't consist of those type of cards, so you should be fine. I'm putting this back in order because I shuffled it and I like things in order. That's just the type of person I am. If I'm not using it, I want it in order. But that pretty much wraps up the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys want in the next episode. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. And I've got an idea of what I'm doing for episode 4. So I just want to try and avoid that for episode 3 because episode 4 is going to be a really big episode. And I'm trying not to use it up really quickly. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. As I said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully you guys are enjoying how to raise the flag. If you guys have any suggestions for videos, any ideas, etc., please put them down below because I would love to hear from this. And I want to make this a very interactive segment. And that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you for watching. Joey from TeamBurningInfinitey signing out. Peace.